welcome back to Dog Nation's Facebook page. He's Griff, I'm Chip. We're Chip and Griff. This is the Chip and Griff Show, brought to you by Dog Nation, and we are happy to be here. We're happy to be everywhere, anywhere. Happy to be everywhere. Dog Nation is everywhere. How are you, Mike?
I'm good, Chip. How are you doing?
Fantastic. We're getting ready for another game, finally a home game. Geez, it's been forever since we've been back in Athens. It'll be a month by the time they kick off against Auburn on Saturday at 7 p.m., a night game, too, just the second night game of the year. So
3 road games and a bye week.
That's right.
Well, one of them, the road game, is supposed to be a neutral site, technically. You know, I came up with an analogy, Chip, and I never really got your take on this. Do you think Alabama and LSU should play in New Orleans every year as a neutral site game? Because I bet the Alabama fans would love that trip.
That would be a fantastic trip, I think, in New Orleans every year. I don't think it would change the outcome for Alabama.
You think Nick Saban would agree with that?
But I kind of know where you're going with that, and it's interesting because out of the Florida camp, so we're talking about the Georgia-Florida game. We were talking about this a little before we came on the air, and as you know, if you've listened to Griff anywhere, and he's been very adamant about this, he thinks Georgia and Florida need to get rid of the whole Jacksonville
Well, not
deal.
get rid of it entirely, but alternate it. You know, if Florida wants to play their home game in Jacksonville, in their home state, that's fine. But every other year, have it be in Athens because, Chip, you know, I came in from the outside raw, having not seen any of this, with no preconceived notions. Athens, the city of Athens, and Sanford Stadium, to me, is one of the top 5 college football settings anywhere. It is beautiful. They've put money into this. This town is beautiful. It's a wonderful downtown with great merchants and restaurants. And I think Jacksonville's great, but why not alternate it? Why give a game away when you've got a setting like Georgia does? And why would Kirby want to give up a recruiting weekend every other year?
Yeah, well, he's made that pretty clear. He does not like giving up that recruiting weekend, and you know Florida doesn't either. I remember clearly that Jeremy Foley, when he was AD, and he's no longer AD, but he still swings a pretty big stick down there. He said if that were to happen, that you know it was not renewed every year in Jacksonville, that Florida would still play their games in Jacksonville.
That'd be perfect.
Which is and as you talked about, there are I think you wrote this, and you and I have talked about it. There are logistical problems with taking the Mercedes-Benz Stadium just because it doesn't seat as many.
Right.
But you could do that. You would lose a certain amount of seats if you rotated like you were suggesting. Play in Jacksonville and Florida's home campus.
I'm off of the Atlanta kick. I've been told it's never going to happen because Mercedes-Benz Stadium doesn't seat enough.
Yeah.
So that's out of the mix. But the Athens Jacksonville thing is very much being discussed.
So let us know how you feel about it. It's an interesting issue, and this is what we like about having Griff here. He's got fresh eyes on this whole thing.
Doesn't mean I'm right. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and you know, if you look at the way the series has gone for the last quarter of a century, you could say that Florida might have had an advantage, but they also had some pretty good football teams under Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. And the flip side of that is Georgia was dominating the series for a long time under Vince Dooley under the same circumstances. So. You know, at the end of the day, my personal opinion is that it's not going to change just because over the years, it's been going on since 1933. And every time it comes up for renewal, which is on a short contract basis every 4 years, Jacksonville sweetens the pot, Jacksonville sweetens the pot, Jacksonville sweetens the pot, to the point that, you know, Georgia, I do get that there's more travel for Georgia involved.
More risk, too. The 2 shootings within a few blocks of the stadium, 2 people killed within a week of the game.
Well, that's an equal risk for both teams playing in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just no more risky for Georgia than it is for
Florida. That's true. I just think about the fans.
But the crime is bad in that town and in that area. With you know, I believe that was a domestic-oriented crime that happened, but the one 2 weeks before, wasn't it? I think it was a week before. There was a shooting down in there. But first on, you know, that'll never go away. That debate will always be there. And when is that contract supposed to be up?
2021.
2021. So there'll be plenty of time to hash that out. In the meantime, Georgia's got a rather significant game, or not significant, depending on how you look at it. I think it's significant. never minding that Georgia is already qualified to play in the SEC championship game. The fact of the matter is if your slim chances of making the college football playoff uh, would be gone probably if you lost to Auburn, even if you were to defeat Alabama in the SEC championship game. So that's ultimately what's riding on the Auburn game is you got to stay perfect, and that's why Georgia won't discuss it in any way, shape, or form. It's just the next game. You got to take care of the next game because any loss in the playoff atmosphere that we have right now is going to be costly. Now you would be a two-loss team going into the SEC championship game. So even if you do beat Alabama, you're probably not going to get in as a two-loss team.
Okay, well, let me take it one step further. I agree with what Chip's saying. It would make it's much harder for Georgia to make the college football playoff, even if they beat Alabama. Let me be the negative Nancy here. Assuming you lose to Alabama and now you're a 3-loss team, you don't make a New Year's Six bowl. And instead of going to the Fiesta Bowl or the Sugar Bowl, you're going to Tampa or Orlando, another trip for the Georgia fans that like to go to Florida.
Yeah, and that's where it ultimately comes to, and certainly where Kirby and them are coming from. It's a different aspect for the players than it is for those of us who analyze college football and all that. But you just got to take care of the game that's in front of you. At the end of the day, that's the only one you control. That's the one you have to take care of. And I think there's something to be won here for Georgia, even in the grand scheme of things. Because right now, did you happen to catch what are the points separating Michigan and Georgia right now in 4th and 5th?
I didn't see in the college football playoff poll. I know in it's pretty significant.
It's significant right now.
And Michigan still.
Michigan helped themselves this past weekend
tremendously. Well, they didn't have they were ranked ahead of Georgia without a top 25 win, which I debated and I had a problem with. They hadn't beat anybody in the top 25. They barely beat Northwestern. They lost to Notre Dame by a touchdown when Vanderbilt only lost to Notre Dame by 6 points.
And the committee's argument on the first college football rankings poll was that they had more wins over teams with winnings records.
Yeah, and they did.
Yeah.
It was a technicality. I mean,
Georgia's technically played 3 straight top 10 teams. Lost one.
Well, I don't know if that's true anymore. Now that Missouri's won, they're one more team with a winning record. Kentucky's got a winning record because Georgia, like Michigan, had 5 wins over teams with winning records.
Right.
Georgia had 3 and beat 2 500 teams.
Right.
So, I mean, it was kind of a technicality type of deal. And but to the point, Chip, we do expect Georgia to move up to number 5 in the college football rankings tonight. Kirby's right. These rankings, they don't really mean much. To me, this is a big boy game for Georgia. And what I mean by that is this. The last 2 games, Georgia's had their backs to the wall, and they've come out, as Kirby said, scratching and clawing and won. This game doesn't have the same sense of urgency because they've clinched a spot in the SEC championship game. Now, Kirby will tell you that ideally he wants these guys focused on all the games the same way, putting the same amount into it. And I get that. But human nature kind of is what it is, Chip. I think that loss of sense of urgency will be balanced out, though, by the fact that it's back in Sanford Stadium. It's a night game. Let's face it, the Stanford Stadium home games, as great as this environment is, and to me it truly is one of the top 5 in the country, these have not been fun games. It was the heat was out of control. They were hot, uncomfortable games, and non-competitive games at that. So this is the marquee home game of the season, in my opinion.
That's one of the reasons you have a lot of fans, and I'm not sure if you're up on the phenomena of the black jerseys. Have you been schooled on that?
I've heard that a lot of people are clamoring for that.
They're clamoring for the black jerseys. Kirby's, pretty neutral when it comes to black jerseys. He wants to stick with traditional, but it goes back to Georgia. The whole black jersey phenomenon. Mark Richt surprisingly whipped him out in 2007 for the Auburn game. Georgia had a tremendous game. Black jerseys became very popular as a merchandising thing. That was in November. The Christmas of 2007, the run on black jerseys, particularly number 24 Noshawn Moreno jerseys, went through the roof, and it was a cool thing. But then fast forward to the next year, 2008.
They bring him out for Florida?
They brought him out for Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
And then they got their butts kicked, and then now suddenly there was a black jersey thing. Like, we don't put those black jerseys away and burn them and never wear them again. And then there's been various incarnations.
Have they come back since then?
Georgia's worn them for some non-SEC games, and it kind of looks like that Kirby might like to do the black jerseys on games that don't matter. He said at the beginning of his tenure here, he said, black's one of our colors. We're red and black. He doesn't really have a problem with that, but he's more of a traditionalist. But he also doesn't believe that you should use them as some kind of motivation or some kind of special gimmick. And, and that's why I don't think he'd do it for an Auburn or somebody like that, because you don't need any fake juice. And he was on the other side of that whole Alabama black jersey thing, and probably used it against Georgia.
Oh, I'm sure they did
in some way, shape, or form. So I'm curious to see how you guys feel about the black jerseys. We'll respond to your comments here when we see them. Apologize, we have it. This is an interactive medium, as you all know, and we try to answer your questions. Griff and I can both see the screen now, so if you got something to ask, let us know. We'd love to get your comments on black jerseys. I don't think we'll see them. I've gotten no buzz. I see the social media buzz. I see the hashtag on Twitter that people are something about UGA and black or whatever. But I don't get the feeling that's going to happen for the Auburn game. And if it did happen in a game this year, I could see them using them for UMass just to whip them out because they got them. But but that's what do you think about it?
Here's the thing: Georgia's got some of the best uniforms in college football. I mean, they're red and silver. It's a beautiful uniform.
It's a good look.
I like it better than the way they look in black. Now I understand people want to see alternative uniforms and kids like that. I'd like to see something, if you're going to go alternative, I'd like to see you go Oregon with it and have some fun and maybe have a silver helmet with a black G on it and red trim or something really,
Oh, that was the other thing now that you mentioned that. So Georgia came out with what you're talking about.
Maybe a black helmet with a white
I forget what they called the uniforms they had. If you guys can remember, they wore them against Boise State.
I do vaguely remember that now.
And everybody said they looked like the Power Rangers, and then they lost. So that was another thing. It's like, no black jerseys, no funky uniforms. Let's do it. But you were at Tennessee, and they whipped out the Smoky Grays. Did their fan base have a reaction to how the game went? They just according to how they wore.
The best reaction Tennessee fans had when they wore black on Halloween and beat South Carolina, and they haven't worn them again. That was a Lane Kiffin thing. It was hotly contested. The Smoky Grays were liked same thing. When they were winning with them, they were great.
Yeah.
Georgia beat them 41-0. I don't think you're going to see him again with Philip Fulmer there as AD or Jeremy Pruitt.
Hey, Christopher Moore, that's my cousin there. John McMillan says, I wish they bring back the old metallic silver pants. I actually agree with that. They had some really bright silver breeches at one end. It was Nike and material and stuff like that. But I've heard that down the pipe that they're working on a more metallic look that Georgia could whip out. As far as I know, I don't know. Maybe it may be worth talking to John Michad. He's the equipment manager for Georgia, and see if they're working on anything like that. But uniforms are easy. Somebody else here, I'm sorry I missed your name, but said we can dress in pink. It doesn't matter. It's how you play the game, and that's true. It doesn't matter what uniform you have. Maybe to a little degree how it might motivate your opponent. But you're right in that truly it's about, how the players compete on the field. And getting back to that, I felt like Georgia answered some questions about them in the Kentucky game. That remains to be seen at what level Kentucky is actually playing overall. But they did improve on defense. They did run the ball way better than they have. And then now here comes Auburn. Let's touch on the game a little bit. The matchup, struggling on offense, struggling with offensive line play, specifically not having a premier running back. Flip side, still really tough up front. On defense, this is Rodney Garner has done a great job of recruiting defensive linemen. They got a bunch of guys across that front that Georgia wanted and lost on. Derek Brown, Dontavius Russell. What's the other guy's name? Marlon Davidson. I don't know whether they recruited him or not, but those are tough matchups. Now, Georgia did a great job against Josh Allen. They've done a pretty good job when they've been challenged on the defensive front. They seem to be coming together and peaking right now. But how do you see those two matchups, their offensive line and defensive line?
Yeah, to me, this is a game of intangibles, Chip. I think the only chance Auburn has is if Georgia turns the ball over or gives them the momentum. Auburn's playing better football right now. They've won their last two games. Whatever was going on in the locker room looks like it's been worked out. I mean, Auburn is a more talented team than Kentucky. I know what the records will tell you. I know what the rankings will tell you. But I guarantee you that the Georgia players were much more confident facing Kentucky than they are facing a team that humbled them pretty good last year. Now, to be fair, Auburn has lost 4 of their starting 5 linemen from a year ago on their offensive line.
Right, that's the issue.
But on the flip side, Georgia's lost 5 of their starting front 7 on the defense, and they haven't been nearly as dominant in their front 7. That's why that performance at Kentucky was so encouraging. So that's kind of a wash to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think Auburn, this is the 3rd time these teams are meeting in a calendar year. These teams and these coaches, they know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the momentum early on, because listen, Auburn's playing for something too.
Yeah.
If Auburn wins this game, they're back in the top 25. They can salvage the season. It's been a disappointing season. And conversely, if Georgia loses this game, they lose a lot of momentum that they've built up. And, the UMass game is kind of a shrug. Nobody outside of, Atlanta really cares about Georgia Tech, with national. All you got to do is look at the game time for that.
Yeah.
It's a noon game. That's the nation telling you, hey, we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't care. We don't care if you're ranked number 5. We don't care. We're not putting it in the 3:30 or 7 p.m. slot.
But as you've learned, Georgia fans care.
Some do. Yeah, I've learned the ones that do care passionately.
Yeah.
But I think the majority
tends to be the older set.
Much older.
Mm-hmm.
Like your grandpa. If he's still alive. My grandpa's not.
Yeah.
Your grandpa
mine isn't.
Well, then he doesn't. Then Georgia Tech. That's where that rivalry.
My dad went to Georgia Tech for a little while.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So if you ask the Georgia fans when I've done these polls, Florida's the top rival, and then the number 2 rival's kind of fuzzy. But I think Auburn's been that. When I talked with Coach Dooley, he told me that was the big rivalry back in the day because that decided who won the SEC title.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech and Tennessee maybe kind of.
Yeah,
right there,
Tennessee, certainly since divisional play in 1992, and they dominated the
series.
That's
what's changed.
Yeah.
When people when I tell people it's crazy to play by choice, to choose to play a rival the week before the SEC championship game is crazy. And they say, well, Griff, there's tradition. I said, yeah, but the SEC championship game wasn't there when this started. And the forefathers wouldn't have been that nuts to do it. And to do something just because you've always done it isn't a good. That's not how you advance. That's not how Kirby Smart has advanced the program. Georgia, we don't need an indoor facility because we've never had one before. Newsflash, you haven't won a national title here in a long time.
South Carolina's dealing with the same thing. Florida's dealing with the same thing. Both of them play a rival in the last game here. And in fact, we've seen it with Florida losing to Florida State. They turn around and play.
They've won one national title with
SEC
Steve Spurrier.
championship game.
One national title with Steve Spurrier. Think about that.
Yeah. So that's some real stuff. A couple of questions dotted through here. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Ben Cleveland update. Looks to me like he's going to play. I mean, he's out there firing off.
You saw him firing off last week.
And he made the last 2 trips. And this time you've actually got an issue with Cade Mays, which even puts more emphasis on maybe needing to go with this guy and let Cade get that shoulder. He's got a stinger. Those things can stay with you for a while. The other question was about Justin Fields. You were always going to have a Justin Fields question. The question that I saw was, do you see him being instituted in this game plan as well? And do you see him passing? I'll answer it first, and then I'll get you to go. Yes. I mean, I think Kirby is being genuine. Even in the Florida game, he said, I wish we could have gotten him in. They got him in really the most, I thought, clearly utilized role in the Kentucky game when they brought him in on 3rd and short, brought him in running situations, didn't pretend to pass with him. On the passing thing, there's no question. We've both seen him pass. Everybody's seen him pass. Saw him pass early on. We've seen him pass in practice. The kid can pass. He's got a great arm. But I think Georgia's waiting for just the right time before they whip that out. And that might be Alabama in the SEC championship game when they, do some kind of play action with Justin Fields. But your thought, you wrote about Justin earlier this week. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he hasn't thrown the ball in a month since the Vanderbilt game.
Yeah.
And I think he's rusty, and I think he needs to throw the ball against Auburn and UMass and Georgia Tech if you plan on using him against Alabama. Just to be fair, I know a lot of people have tried to draw a parallel to Tua and what he did at Alabama last year, but it's not even close. Alabama used him a lot more. And to be fair, Alabama was in a situation where they could afford to use him a lot more. Right. Georgia's had some tough games, Chip. I mean, there was really no place to bring him in that LSU game. I don't think you wanted to take Jake Fromm out of the Florida game. He finally hit stride. And then against Kentucky, I mean, your season's on the line. Kirby did put him in there, and Justin proved very effective in those short yardage packages, which is where he can contribute right now. And I go back to that Tim Tebow interview we did. And Tebow talked about how he handled his role his freshman year
Yeah.
and wanted to do everything he could from the team and wanting to do well with every opportunity so that the coach would want to put him in again. And I think that's how Justin's probably approaching it now. I do think he'll throw the football in this game. As rusty as he is, as uncertain as he looked, and the one time it looked like he was going to drop back, I think Georgia will at some point be up by 10 points and be able to throw the football with Justin Fields.
Yeah, this is a night game, and Georgia's they had one other night game. Was that Middle Tennessee State, or what was the other night game?
Yeah, that was a
this
night
year?
game. Yeah.
This should be a pretty, good environment, a pretty rocking environment for Georgia. Being Georgia Auburn, hadn't been home in a month. I'm eager to. I think that atmosphere is going to help, Georgia overall. Now, not that Georgia needs anything special to get up for Auburn. Black jerseys or what have it. It is the South's oldest rivalry, and the recruiting basis on these two. I mean, Auburn, there's dozens and dozens of kids from Georgia, and they go head to head in recruiting everywhere they go all the time. So I think that's the biggest thing on the line. And that's the other thing. I mean, Jeff Sentell will tell you more about this tomorrow night, but this is a huge recruiting weekend. Georgia's got a lot of recruits coming, and because of the early signing period, and the Tech being a noon game, you're not going to have much of an opportunity to do much there. UMass isn't, so this is it.
You lost to Jacksonville. That was supposed to be your home game against Florida, but you played in Jacksonville. So you lost that recruiting weekend.
See how you brought that right back around.
I'm just saying, this is a no pun intended, chips all in recruiting weekend for Georgia.
My iPad just went dead. Keep talking about that, would you?
Well, Georgia needs to impress. I mean,
Yeah.
they need to win this game. This is a survival game. I think Chip brought it up best. I mean, if Georgia wants to keep their goal ahead of them, and that is to potentially win the national championship, they need to win this game. And that's important because that's what's driving these guys. And I give this young team a lot of credit. I tried to remind people of this, and I understand how fan bases get spoiled. I remember when I was a fan growing up, and really before I got into the underbelly of this profession and really learned how it worked. I used to like the Denver Broncos. And John Elway was my favorite player. And I thought the Broncos should be great every single season. And it didn't matter who the running backs or the wide receivers were. In my mind, as long as John Elway was the quarterback, they should be really good. Obviously, it doesn't work that way, nor does it work that way with college football teams. And this is a different Georgia team than last year. Yes, Jake Fromm looks familiar to you. So does DeAndre Swift and Terry Godwin and DeAndre Baker. And we can name 6 or 7 other key players. But they lost so many key players, and not just key players, but great players, Chip.
Right.
Potential Hall of Famers. You're talking about the number 2 and number 3 all-time leading rushers now in the NFL, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, the starting nose. I could go on and on. It's a different team. There's a different chemistry. This season has been a work in progress from day one. Last year, when I saw Georgia roll into Knoxville and steamroll Tennessee, I said that is the best college football team I have seen in a long time. I've only felt that way in spurts.
Yeah.
The third quarter of the South Carolina game, the third quarter of the Kentucky game.
Right.
Not at all at LSU.
Right.
And I think, was it you I was talking to? We said if this year's Georgia team were to play last year's Georgia team would win by 14 points and rush for over 300 yards.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we have analytics, so we can see what you guys are reading and how much you're reading and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, just you could last year this time, Georgia is undefeated and ranked number 1.
Yeah,
going into the Auburn game.
There. Yeah,
Georgia on the other side of things loses to LSU and then has an off week. So it's kind of like everybody was kind of
deflating.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah,
mean, it was what happens. But you know what? I get the feeling there feels to me like there's some momentum building for Georgia again.
That's why they got to win this game.
And you got to keep rolling on it. Yeah, I mean, you got to get that engine rolling downhill. And if you can do that, Georgia can get hot here. Now, there's not many people in the United States of America who believe Georgia has any chance against Alabama. Vegas has already laid a line on it, I think. Wasn't that 17 or 14 or something like that? A big line. We'll see. But momentum plays a big role in college football, and that's what makes this so important. Keep going, keep
things
doing
can
the things
change
you're doing.
fast. A couple of injuries, and all of a sudden, maybe Alabama doesn't look as unbeatable with a different quarterback under center or with a couple of wide receivers out.
That's another deal. The whole injury factor. Georgia at this point last year had virtually no injuries. This year they've been dealing with an injury a week. I mean, we hadn't seen David Marshall. Ben Cleveland. We expect him to come back for this game, especially with Cade Mays being dinged up. Andrew Thomas has been dinged up. Lamont Gilliard's dinged up.
Almost
now.
Everybody on the offensive line has missed a snap except for the right tackle.
Isaiah Wilson.
He's the only
Wouldn't you
one.
love to talk to him? We hadn't had a chance to talk to Big Isaiah.
Great to talk to him.
Isaiah Wilson, I went and met him in New York City when he signed with Georgia out of Brooklyn, and just an incredible kid, and really just has overcome so much. And to see him, last year he shows up as the 5-star number 3 tackle in the country. Everybody's thinking even the great Jeff Sentell said plug and play player. He was melting in that preseason Georgia heat and just couldn't stay on the field long enough to and they ended up redshirting him. But I think it's clear that they've got a guy that's looks like pretty much an immovable object at right tackle for the next 3 years. And that's the thing that's so amazing about this team, y'all. Whatever Georgia gets out of this 2018 season, in my opinion, is gravy. I mean, this was not supposed to be the year, just like last year wasn't supposed to be the year. Now, maybe we should have seen it coming with all that leadership on the team. I guess we didn't know that, Sony Michel and Nick Chubb and Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy and all those guys would choose to come back for their senior seasons. But this team is built for next year. The schedule really is built for next year with Notre Dame coming in as a non-conference opponent. So, Georgia being where they are is great. Now, that said, it's going to be Georgia, Alabama eventually, and nobody's going to pick Georgia in many of those matchups. I don't know. Is there any? I'll tell you one. Georgia's got is better than Alabama on the matchup kicking game.
Yeah.
Rodrigo Blankenship, and I don't know much about their punting game. I don't know, have they punted this year, Alabama? Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 times. That guy's probably rusty more than anything else. But other than that, Georgia's not going to be picked in many of the matchups. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wrote a column a few weeks ago when I went and covered the Alabama-Tennessee game, and I felt like Georgia was the best matchup from the SEC East Division for Alabama because of the secondary.
Yeah.
And Alabama's passing game is so lethal, and they're able to move the ball so quickly down the field. And it's really an offense like I haven't seen since Pete Carroll was at USC with all that talent that they had out there with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and all of those guys. But I do think because of Georgia's secondary, the big question for me is how much can Georgia's front seven grow up? We did see some young linebackers flash. At Kentucky, we saw Cox and Tyndall make their first sacks of their career.
Yeah.
We saw Robert Beal. He's really contributing. I mean, that's a guy that's taken a big step. You look at the tackles he had against LSU, and then he missed the Florida game to go to a funeral, but he came up with 3 more stops at Kentucky. That's a guy I've got my eye on as a rising star. I think Malik Herring's made the most of his opportunities, and I sense that front seven is somewhat recharged and revitalized after the bye week. And that, to me, was a very important area of the team that needed to improve, because to have any chance against Alabama, your front seven has got to be able to put up enough of a fight.
Yeah, and then James Bryan here says if we can pressure and rattle Tua and slow down the running game, we have a chance. But then,
is that all you got to do?
That's a huge if, right there.
Is that all you got to do?
That's a big one right there.
And then conversely, James
yes,
Fromm,
David Hill, Adam Anderson, another one that came in there and played.
Jake Fromm, continues to play well. The emergence of J.J. Holloman, I think, has been really big. He's kind of a go-to guy. Terry Godwin, had a touchdown catch against. Was it Florida, I suppose, on that crossing route? I haven't seen as much from Terry this year as I would have anticipated.
Well, I think that really hurt him early on, all the time he missed. And then now you've had J.J. Holloman certainly assert himself in the rotation.
And Riley Ridley, I don't think, started the last game. And that's a guy that
he's been quiet lately.
Well, he had, 6 catches in the championship game, and we thought going into this year that, he might really evolve into a star, but he's just kind of disappeared.
Let's get some questions here. Donald Fryer says, how about them dogs from Lubbock, Texas? We appreciate you weighing in here. Y'all be sure and share the Chip and Griff show on your Facebook timeline so we get more people on here every week, more people knowing that we're out here. We have Daniel Taylor Locklear says we have to have a better overall grade than a B to beat Bama. And yeah, when I do those grade reports every week, report card, that's what I'm thinking about. I mean, the Georgia, verbalized their expectation at the beginning of the year. They expect to be in the college football playoff and repeat as SEC champions. And that's where my baseline of the grades are. That's why I haven't given Georgia an overall A, I don't think, all year.
Well, Georgia will tell you they don't feel like they played their best game. Kirby said it. The players say it every week.
Can our O-line hold Quentin Williams? Number 92 for Alabama, I believe.
The O-line can hold anybody that they designate.
They've actually played really well. Kirby alluded to this, kind of like they responded to competition. They, Andrew Thomas, Jamari Sawyer, Solomon Kinley, Isaiah Wilson. These guys were highly recruited. They know a lot of these other guys at these other teams, and they're like, yeah, I can take them. I think they get a little bit of edge about them when they're playing guys like that. Tin Man says Holloman is the new Wims. Mike talked about it early in the year. He said they're really missing Wims. They're really missing Wims, and JJ has come through and kind of answered that void. I think we've only got a few more minutes, so get your questions in if you can. LSU's O-line is trash, says John J. McMillan. They did a pretty good job against Georgia, though. I wouldn't say they're trash. It's all relative. Contain Tua and Bama falls apart, says Warren. That's another one. Is that all? That guy's been incredible.
He really has.
How much did Jalen Hurts play? Did he play at all in the LSU game?
I don't think so.
I don't think he did either.
Yeah, I mean, that was such a mistake when people made him the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He was more a byproduct of the system. That should have been Josh Dobbs.
Yeah. Prep with Fields the next 3 games if we can get him some snaps. And I
appreciate, the optimism that people have with Justin Fields. I mean, he is an amazing talent, but you just can't make it happen before it happens. And, Kirby and Jim Chaney are out there every day evaluating this chip and watching how Justin does and what he picks up and how quickly he processes things. And I think he's a great quarterback. I just feel like people underestimate and underappreciate what Jake Fromm does under center in terms of all the things he's able to do with pre-snap reads and calling the right protections and calling the right plays at the line of scrimmage and managing the huddle.
And getting the play in and off.
The effect that he has on his teammates, the calmness they feel, again, with a guy that's 20-3, and I've compared it to flying in a storm. I mean, do you want to see the silver-haired guy that's been flying that 747 for 20 years? Or do you want the guy right out of flight school who's an honor graduate but hasn't carried passengers before?
That's a great analogy. Speaking of the analogies here. Hey, we had Chris Pryor here from San Diego, California. I think that's probably our farthest Dog Nation fan today.
Thanks,
yeah,
Chris.
We've got a lot. I appreciate you being here.
Philip's right.
Here's Philip's always in here. Got to beat the barn first.
He's
barn
right.
Being a reference to Auburn. We're in the last minute here. You got any final thoughts you want to give us?
No, I'm interested to see how this rivalry goes. As I take in Georgia, and as somebody who never covered the program on this side of it.
Mark Bratcher says, "I want the guy out of flight school." That puts you in a mile, buddy. Go ahead. Excuse me.
I want to see the differences and how the fans react. I mean, this place has always been a great road trip. When I was covering, whether I was covering Auburn, Alabama, or Tennessee, I saw all those schools play here. But now being on this side of it, there's just so much pageantry. And Athens is just such a great place for college football. And I think so much of Sanford Stadium, I've really missed it, as a working professional, but also just sitting in that stadium and looking out, Chip. It's beautiful. I know people have said I've challenged tradition with Jacksonville and the Georgia Tech. I don't want to see the end zone closed and the west end zone. I don't want to see that. Yeah, they don't need any more seats. This place is beautiful, though, and this is where Georgia fans should want to see every game that they possibly could, in my opinion. I can't imagine. There's just not many places like this.
Yeah. I'll answer this one last question from Mark Jones, and then I'll give my statement. Mark Jones, the third one, knows if Georgia loses the championship, and if they go to the Sugar Bowl, right, and who would they play there? I don't know who they play there, but I agree with that scenario. I think if Georgia wins out, so they're 11-1,
and then
loses to Alabama in the championship game, and let's just say they lose by what people expect, a couple touchdowns. They're not real competitive. 17 points,
38-21.
Yeah, something like that. Then yeah, I think Georgia probably goes to the Sugar Bowl. I don't know who their opponent would be. Maybe somebody like Michigan or somebody that got knocked
How
out
about the Fiesta Bowl,
as
Chip?
well.
I know Georgia's never been
No.
there.
Well, they have. I think they did. Did they not go there to Fiesta Bowl? No, they haven't. You're right. I was thinking of the old Sun Bowl or something like that.
El Paso.
Yeah. Yeah, the Fiesta Bowl would be great.
Isn't it large? And maybe that would mean another SEC team would have to slip in and take that SEC slot. Maybe if LSU were to win out, what would?
Yeah, they would love to get LSU.
Well, they've
in
got
there.
2 losses, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if LSU were to win out and that scenario were to play out, maybe LSU slides into the Sugar and Georgia goes to the Fiesta, but the Sugar is contracted, I believe, to take it would be Big 12. I believe it's SEC Big 12, so that would be Oklahoma. If it may be a Georgia
Oklahoma rematch,
which
yeah.
that doesn't.
That doesn't do anything for me either.
I don't like rematches.
I mean, I'd love to see Georgia play Texas or Michigan or.
I want to see them go to the Fiesta Bowl.
They don't play.
See them play somebody fun.
Yeah.
Maybe a Pac-12 team, maybe Washington or Oregon, or
Yeah.
somebody fun from the West.
This is an interesting thing too. If Georgia makes the college football playoffs, those college football playoff semifinals start on December 29th. That means that those of you traveling out there and those of us traveling out there would probably be traveling at the least on Christmas Day. So that could be real easy, real interesting. We need to wrap it up here. So thanks as always for tolerating us, listening to us, giving us your questions. Mike and I we'll be covering practice today. We got a lot more to post on the website. We'll be doing that. Be sure to download Nation app, so you get notifications, all that, and we'll be covering them all. Basketball start. We can talk about that at all. Bulldogs open Friday, right, against Savannah State. Yeah, I can't wait for that.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it is going to be fun to watch Tom Crean this year. And
once the schedule beefs up a little bit,
it'll get a little bit better here real soon. So we'll have all that coming to you on Dog Nation. So we thank you guys for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.